Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and welcome back to Perspectives. We are looking at the spiritual perspectives and the challenges that Islam faces in the West, a civilization that have been attacked by the alien culture, alien values. And we have seen that how the Islamic civilization been destroyed due to that, from within and outside, on economical issues, social issues, personal issues, by the Western values, by the modern values. The question that we coined just before we took a break was Islam as a religion, which we talked about was Islam as a total religion, which is in the essence of all faith, as we said. That was the conclusion given. In that sense, Islam is considered to be the religion. Now we would like to look into Islam when it is dealing with other faiths and other religions. How does it treat, and what does it talk about? Because from one side we are saying that Islam is the essence of all faith. It's all inclusive.
Right.
From the other side, Islam is saying this is Ahl Kitab, this is Mushrik, this is Kafir, and this is how you treat them. They are najis, they are this and they are that, and you deal with them in that fashion. But it's saying, okay, we are all together, but at the same time, and then you also have other religions that came after Islam, such as Sikhism. Sikhism, they call it as a religion. Sikhism as a religious minority. So how Islam will deal with that? Because Islam talks about the religions before it. Islam talks about Christianity. Islam talks about, Judaism. Islam talks about, people of Sabah, for instance, Zoroastrians, right? Or idol worshippers, But the religions in the past or before Islam. But what about the future religions?
Again, as you mentioned before, there are two Islams in a sense, right? And they're not contradictory to each other, right? There's Islam in the universal sense, right, which defines all true religion.
Inna ad-deena indallahi al-Islam.
Right, that's the Islam in the universal sense. Then you have Islam in the particular sense.
At-tafaqquh fi ad-din.
Right, which is the religion that was brought by the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wa alihi, which is the purification and the clarification, okay, of that Islam in universal sense, okay, for the contemporary human being. When I say contemporary human beings, I mean human beings that are for the period of the last days, okay, whether it be 14 centuries ago, whether it be today, the human beings of the last days. Now, from this perspective, then Islam sees all true religions. And what do we mean by true, right? Islam means by true a religion that talks about the unity of God, right? That there is one God. And that it identifies a prophet of that God that brings a teaching of living a proper way of life. So what Islam does is when it sees these religions, okay, it has an identification with them. And Muslims are now therefore called upon to protect them, called upon to respect their right to exist. Now these religions, because they preceded Islam, are to some extent aged. And so they might have certain, degenerations that come along with it. Okay, say take for example Christianity. Okay, Christianity, very emphatically believes in the one God. Okay, but at the same time, it also sees God as a Trinity. And that Jesus Christ is one of that Trinity, okay? From an Islamic point of view, this is a degeneration. Nevertheless, the monotheistic aspect of Christianity is still powerful enough
To consider it as a
For you to,
religion.
for you to consider for you to consider that religion to be sort of a brother religion.
Right. So what you're saying is there's two Islam, right? One is that Islam in that universal sense, like we discussed earlier, the first part of the show. The other Islam is the particular. And this is based on the Quran itself. It's not something that is new,
Right.
which requires a deeper understanding of the Quran to come to this understanding. Inna dina indallahi Islam, near God, Deen Islam is it, which means all inclusive, which means that universal Islam from Adam till the end of time.
Right.
Then you have a particular aspect of Islam, which is at-tafaqqu fi din, Surah Tawbah, verse number 22, chapter 9, verse number 22. It talks about that from among you people, a group of people should go and educate and have a firm understanding of deen.
Right.
This firm understanding of deen is the law,
Right.
the religion, the Quran, the ahkam. And then you go back to your people and then you preach them, right? So that is Islam, and this Islam, which is that particular sort of deen, tends to deal with monotheistic, I would put, faith as its brother faith, as a true religion, and the way of life accepts it and provides its approach or its way of dealing with them. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes.
Right. What about the religions that came after?
All right. Before we go to religions that came after, I think there's also another category.
Right.
Those religions that Islam would consider to be kufr, all right, or shirk,
Right.
which Islam rejects, okay, and challenges.
Polytheist.
Yes. Those religions actually their roots also go back to real religion, but they have degenerated to such an extent that they are no longer viable, right? That they end up being things that mislead and misguide in a complete sense rather than guide in any kind of sense at all.
Right.
And included in them are those religions that are inventions by people.
Okay. Right.
Which Islam rejects, right? And which Islam always acts as a critic of the religions that they support, in terms of trying to keep them straight and pure to the monotheistic idea and values, right? Now, we have this statement that Islam is the final religion of mankind, or not really final religion, but the final revelation to mankind. All right? It's very important. The final revelation to mankind. Because after Islam, there are religions that we find. We find religions. We find invented religions, okay? Or we find religions that are based upon the syncretisms. Religions that are based upon the combination of different religious teachings, right?
Yeah. And that are quite sound.
Well, yeah, in terms of
to a certain extent.
Yeah, to a certain extent. Yeah. I mean, take for example Sikhism. Sikhism is a syncretism between Islam and Hinduism. All right. So Sikhism is monotheistic.
Right.
But when you look at religions like this, you would find that there are certain a very important thing that is missing is the figure of a prophet. A figure like the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or Hazrat Musa or Isa or Dawood or Ismail or something like that. They don't have this. Okay? What Sikhism, for example, goes back to is to a mystic or a couple of mystics.
Saints. That they were there.
Yeah.
Right.
Guru Nanak, for example, okay, to whatever extent, was a Muslim, okay, but nevertheless a Muslim who was open to looking at Hinduism from a higher metaphysical point of view, and was able to see certain profound truths in Hinduism, right, and merged that with Islamic teachings, right, and his followers following, which led to the creation of a new religion. Okay, so you have this process that takes place, where there are combinations between religions and so forth that lead to the creation of new religions, but they are not final revelations. The final revelation, meaning God sending a prophet with a specific message for mankind, right, that ended with the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the Muslim approach is to challenge people. Okay, show us a religion that is based upon a revelation that comes after the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and they can't do it.
So, in the nutshell, revelation. Islam would accept religions that have been that have revelations within itself. But I think, like as you said, even the idol worship and the polytheism is nothing but the perverted form of that very divine faith as well.
Of a divine faith.
Of a divine
yes.
faith.
Yes.
In a particular time and space,
yes.
That was sent, and then eventually it ended up.
Yeah.
And that's how new sort of development or new religions come about, because there was some sort of divinity
yes.
within themselves, like Sikhism that we talked about.
Look at, for example, the religion of the pagan Arabs.
Right.
At the same time they worship different gods, okay, they also had a belief in Allah as the one, as the superior God. Yeah.
Right.
Right. At the same time they worship different gods. They also believe that Ismail and Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, right, were prophets of God.
Right.
But around this core belief, okay, of Tawheed, okay, they built up polytheistic
rituals,
crusts around that.
Right.
That came to dominate their practice.
Right. Right. Now, superficial understanding of this principle might give some sort of how shall I say, some sort of legitimacy for them to treat them in a very un-Islamic, in that divine sense, un-Islamic in that universal sense fashion.
Yes.
By Muslims.
Yes, like without mercy, for example.
Without mercy, that we see, for example, Wahhabism, and certain creeds within it that will allow them, from the Islamic point of view, to behave in that fashion.
Yes.
Right. So, can you shed some light in
Well,
regards
I think when Muslims are unable to sort of see these fundamental principles, these higher principles that we are talking about.
And as a matter of fact, this is used as a means of defaming the faith. This is used. This practice is used as, people stereotype.
Yes.
And associate Islam with these practices of very, merciless behavior, in a very crude and cruel way.
Yeah. Well, again, Islam is merciful, okay? That people who follow these false religions, or different religions from Islam, there are many reasons why in general people follow them. They follow them because they follow a tradition, okay? They follow them without much thinking, okay? Without much metaphysical types of thinking and so on. It's part of culture and so forth. And that a lot of Muslims are Muslims for the same reason.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, they don't have that profound, in-depth understanding of Islam.
Now, to be able to deal with these other religions, you have to deal with them on an intellectual level. You have to deal with them on a level of dialogue. Right? However, literalistic understandings of Islam, okay, do not include dialogue, right? Which requires a dynamic type of engagement of your intellect. Okay? Ritualistic understandings of Islam, okay, literalistic understandings of the Quran, for example, and so forth. Okay? do not aid in having a good rapprochement or good rapport with those people you want to change. Okay? People like this then only see these other people as enemies that need to be silenced. And they are called upon to do that. And they would go back to Quran and say, fighting the believers and smiting the believers and so the disbelievers and so on, point to that. But they do not remember that when the Quran talks about killing the believers and the unbelievers and fighting them and so on, they're talking about it in a warfare type of a situation. Where the unbelievers have gathered together to eradicate the Muslims. You see? And Islam is giving them, or the Quran is giving them, the encouragement to defend themselves. Okay? But with respect to a peaceful coexistence, it does not call for war and violence. Okay? It calls for discourse. So for example, we have in many teachings, the Imams, for example, Imam Jafar as-Sadiq alayhi salam, engaging in debate with atheists among the Muslims. And there's no indication that these atheists are afraid to talk about their lack of belief in God. Okay? And there's no indication that the Imam is condemning them as, that they should be killed and so forth. You see? So it's very, very important for Muslims to be able to understand the idea of religious pluralism. Very, very important.
Right.
Yeah. And I think if they understand that, Muslims will not take this type of hostile, genocidal type of an approach to other religions.
Right. I think when you're talking about religious pluralism, a question would be, does Islam believe in pluralism?
Yes. I think Islam does believe in pluralism within the context of unity. Okay, and it says that Islam, within the context of the unity of Islam in the universal sense, meaning religions believing in the one God that go back to a particular divinely sent prophet. Okay, it believes in this unity, but it also believes in diversity. Okay, or accepts diversity between these religions that come under this particular umbrella. It accepts the right of Christians to exist. It accepts and have their own institutions and have their own methods of teaching and to be free to do so under the protection of a state, the Islamic State, for example. So it has this idea, and we see this in history. It has it even has exercised this right to Hindus, in India. We had Muslim rulers, who allowed Hindus to practice their religion. Even though Hinduism could be as far away from the Islamic idea as many religions in terms of the idol worshipping and stuff like that. But nevertheless, in Hinduism itself, there is a core of monotheism that you can find in there.
Right.
You see? So history is full of examples like this. Yes. From the Prophet,
right,
to the Imams, to the saints of Muslims, etc.
Yeah, it could be known as tolerating, however, but it's much more than that.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just tolerating, because when you're tolerating it, you are, you're making this as there's a multiplicity there.
Mm-hmm.
But rather, Islam's, is a religion of unity. It considers that, it allows that freedom, it appreciates to a certain extent that diversity, and at the same time it kind of invites that sort of belief towards its belief system.
Yes, exactly.
Right. And which unfortunately we don't see Muslims are engaging in this sort of fashion today.
Absolutely.
Right. So to conclude tonight's discussion, we have looked at definition of religion, right? What is religion, and how the youths of today think that being an atheist is a fashion, and they just say that they don't believe in a religion. But as a matter of fact, like we said, that itself is a religion. Not believing in is a religion, and there is a set pattern that exists within being an atheist, and the similar pattern exists within being a Muslim as well. A person is a Muslim, but he is behaving in the same fashion as an atheist.
Right.
And it's just because the fashion to be a Muslim, he's a Muslim.
Right.
Just for the name's sake and such, just for the sake of certain rituals that he has practiced.
Muslim women who wear hijab.
Right.
Who wear hijab from the bosom up.
Right.
It's fashion.
And t-shirt and tight,
yes,
revealing clothes.
Yes, it's a fashion.
Right.
Yeah.
Rather than understanding the deeper the deeper meaning of hijab.
Absolutely.
And other sort of Islamic practices that are there. So it is just a gimmick of the Western pseudo understanding of what religion is, and promoting atheism as a fashion, and youth falling for it.
Absolutely.
Right? Then you have the definition of religion, which we talked about. What is really religion? Which means that a person who believes in a person's life revolving around something. That could be sports, that could be health, that could be science, whatever. Right? Hawa, enough. That's la ilah. That ilah is basically that small g, and
right.
illallah, that's a big, Allah is with a a capital G, God. Right? So whatsoever a person revolves around, that becomes the faith itself. Not the faith, religion itself. Then we talked about Islam as the universal Islam and particular Islam. The universal Islam, it's not Christianity, Judaism, Islam, but rather it is Islam, the way of life, and the life that a person lives full. He lives full. He's not restricted from living full. He is provided a method by which he would live, a method which will allow him to live full, to have the best.
Right.
That's the way. That's what Islam means. So Islam is not a name of a religion that is particular, with certain practices only, but it is the way of life. And here, as it is not, then it will not be associated with an individual, just like how Christianity is associated with Christ, or Judaism associated with the people of Jews, right? And initially we have seen in the West that the superficial understanding of the Orientalist and their thought was that it is Mohammedanism rather than it is Islam. But today we don't see that, because they are aware of it, and they will look stupid to themselves if they call Islam as Mohammedanism. So they are not really defining Islam as Mohammedanism. And the reason they call Mohammedanism was because that they want to associate Islam to a particular time and space, or to a particular person who was an Arab, and he brought certain rules for that a part of the world. We are Westerners, we are modern, we do not need or whatever, So they call that, or they associate Islam with a particular personality, but it's not the case.
Yeah.
Then finally, we talked about how Islam the misunderstanding of Islam as a creed, as a belief, allows them to deal with non-Muslims and non-believers in a cruel fashion, in an absolute fashion, without understanding and how Islam allows that freedom, appreciates the diversity, and promotes and allows them to practice free. And it has been seen in the seerah, in the style of the Imams, the Masumeen, and other Muslim dynasties that existed, the Safavids, the Mughals in India, so on and so forth. Thank you very much, and thank you to all our viewers for being with us, and we hope to see you next week again. Goodbye from Hidayat here tonight. Bye-bye.